friends, in today's video I'll be talking about aggregate demand. It will be more on aggregate demand, right? I had talked about aggregate demand in my previous video, giving you a very brief introduction of aggregate demand, saying that it's the total demand in the economy. And aggregate demand is basically given by the entire expenditure in the economy, right? So that entire expenditure is given by these four sectors, or we can say these four components. That's your consumption expenditure, this is your investment, this is your investment by the private sector, this is your government expenditure, and this is your net exports. Net exports basically means your exports minus your imports. All right, so these are the major four sectors that give you your aggregate demand, expenditure by these major four sectors, right? Now in today's video, what I'll be discussing about the relationship between aggregate demand and the price level, right? How are they related, and the effect of these ultimately lead to your real GDP in the economy. So the effect of between, or the relationship between these two, it finally affects your real GDP in the economy, right? So this is what I'll be doing in today's video, okay? And so for that, first of all, I'll draw this graph. So what I have is, here I have the price level, here I have the real GDP, and I'll draw my aggregate demand like this, okay? So let's say I have these 2 points. So this is PLO and this is your RGDPO, and this is my PL1 and RGDP1, okay? All right, and then what I'm just trying to tell you, that when there is a change in the price level, then how is your real GDP changes, right? So basically we are showing an inverse relationship between your price level and real GDP finally, right? Now that is attained by the effect on these of the components of aggregate demand, okay? Or in simple words, if you want to just understand like this, that it's basically showing the inverse relationship between your price level and your aggregate demand. So any movement along the aggregate demand is only given by the changes in the price level, right? That ultimately affects your real GDP. Do you understand this? Okay, now let's assume that there is a drop in the price level. So from PLO, when my price level was PLO, my real GDP was RGDPO, right? Or 0, whatever you want to say. Now there's a drop. So from PL0, let's say my price level drops to PL1. So my real GDP, going by the aggregate demand, becomes RGDP1. Now we want to show that from here to here, I'm giving an explanation from point, let's say E to F. How do you arrive, right? Or why do you arrive, basically, okay? All right, so for this, what we have to understand is that this movement along the aggregate demand can be caused through three effects, okay? It can be due to these three effects. Okay, so the first is the real wealth effect, right? Real wealth effect. So what is the real wealth effect? All right, let's say that there's a drop in the price. That's what I'm assuming, right? So there's a drop in the price. So if your nominal wealth is constant, everything is constant, your nominal income is constant, your nominal wealth is constant, everything is constant, and there is a fall in the prices, what happens is your real purchasing power increases, right? Now with the same amount of income you can buy more goods because the prices have gone down, so your purchasing power increases, so that's your real purchasing power goes up. So now when your real purchasing power goes up, then basically you start consuming more. Okay, so your consumption level increases. Now consumption being a part of your aggregate demand, so when your consumption level increases, then, or your consumption expenditure, whatever you want to say, then basically your aggregate demand increases, and so does your real GDP. Right? So this is how your change in the price level is related to real GDP through your aggregate demand components. Okay, so the fall in the price level affect your aggregate demand components, thereby affecting your total aggregate demand, thereby affecting your real GDP. Okay, now this is just for the real wealth effect that affects your consumption. In the next we'll talk about for the investment thing. Okay, let's see how investment is affected. So what is the effect we are talking about here? So for investment, the effect that we consider is the interest rate effect. Okay, that's the interest rate effect. So what happens in the interest rate effect is that when there is a fall in the price level, okay, what happens is that your transaction demand of money, so your transaction demand for money goes down, right? So the transaction demand for money, just to recall, is basically the demand for money for your everyday transactions. Now, since the prices have gone down, so you will demand less of money, right? But in the market, the money supply is constant. It's the same as before. So basically what happens to the interest rates, that interest rates in the economy, they go down, they move down. Again, I'm telling you, keep this in mind that all the other factors here are constant, right? So when the price level goes down, then your transaction demand for money decreases, and since your money supply is constant, so your interest rates in the economy goes down, right? Interest rates being the equilibrium indicator for your demand and supply of money in the money market. Right? So your interest rate goes down. Interest rate goes down basically means that your investment moves up, right? You know that they are inversely related. So your investment, as your interest rate goes down, your investment increases, and thereby that increases aggregate demand in the economy, which ultimately increases the real GDP in the economy. Okay, so that could be the second effect that can happen due to the fall in the prices, okay, due to which the aggregate demand might go up and thereby real GDP in the economy. So if I come back to this graph, the graph remains the same, it's just the explanation, right? So price goes down, then what happens, how interest rate can be affected is through what I've just explained, through transaction demand going down, money supply being the same, so interest rate goes down, right? And so there is increase in your investment, thereby there could be increase in your aggregate demand. So this is how the second effect can take place when there is a fall in the prices, right? And the third effect that we talk about is the trade effect. Okay, now what happens when there's a fall in prices? When there's a fall in prices, then for foreigners, our goods become cheaper. So foreigners demand more of our goods, right? Because for them, our goods become cheaper as the prices, domestic prices have fallen, right? So this increases the exports from the country, right? So the exports from the country increases, so which basically increases your net exports, assuming that our imports are constant, which thereby increases the aggregate demand in the economy, which increases the real GDP. All right, do you understand this? So the trade effect is like this. So if there is a fall in prices, if there's a domestic fall in the prices, then our goods become cheaper for the foreigners, and so the demand for our goods increases. That increases our exports, and assuming our imports are constant or maybe less than our exports, then the net exports increases in the economy, aggregate demand increases, and thereby real GDP increases. So again, the graph remains the same. It's just the effect. So what, due to the fall in prices, what component is affected more and how does it contribute to the increase in aggregate demand and thereby increase in real GDP is something to watch for an economy, right? So we cannot be certain. But these three effects can take place. That's what I'm trying to make you understand, when there is a fall in prices, and that's how there is an inverse relationship between the fall in prices and your real GDP. Okay, hope it was a good one. See you next time. Bye bye.